Welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Max Whittle. Max is a breathwork expert and neurobiologist with 3 decades of daily meditation and breathwork practice. Originally from Britain, Max has lived in Japan for over 20 years, is fluent in Japanese, and was one of the teachers on the Musashi Experience, a breathwork and jujitsu adventure in Japan I participated in over the summer. Max and Nick Gregoriadis, a fourth-degree black belt under Roger Gracie, really delivered on every aspect of that trip. And Max had me on his own Inactivate podcast, geared to his breathwork and meditation audience. He had me on to talk about my experience, and I'm happy to share that interview with you today. If you listen to this podcast and feel inspired to go on the next Musashi Experience in 2026, you can save $100 with the code RDTV100. That's RDTV100. All caps. It was pretty amazing, and it was an all-inclusive adventure, and I'm very glad I went. Now, without further ado, enjoy this conversation with Max Whittle.
So, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome. Haven't seen you since we were here in Japan, which was, what is that now? 2 months ago? Is it 3 months ago? Something like that? 2 months. Is that right?
Maybe 2 months. I think we're at 2 months.
2 months.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful time. Right now it's beautiful, but very hot. It's very hot. It's that time of year when you sweat just by standing still in the shade. So
Mm-hmm.
we got it just the right time, I think. But welcome, Roy. It's a pleasure to have a conversation with you. And I'd like to kind of start, if possible, just kind of like delving into both of our backstories a little bit, because your people may not know anything about who I am, and
Uh-huh.
anyone who's watching on my channel is not going to know much about you, if anything. And
Mm-hmm.
I would love to just hear, actually, I would love to hear what was the kind of moment where you felt like this is my path? I want to be a budoka or a martial artist. What was the age when you first felt kind of drawn to that?
Mm. Oh man, Max, that's a one. Thank you for having me. Two, that goes way back. That goes way back. There was some kind of appeal from even my early days
Mm,
to the martial arts.
mm,
I remember distinctly visiting my cousin who lived in California,
mm,
and we didn't have cable growing up.
mhm,
So, and my mom didn't like me watching any violence. So I was at his apartment and there were kung fu movies on TV. And I was transfixed.
mm,
I wanted to be those guys, and the control that they had over their body and the backflips and everything. It was just
mm,
fascinating to me. I
mm,
really was into learning how to do whatever that was. And then eventually, yeah, I studied a little karate as a kid, for like a year or something. It was okay. I didn't really understand what was happening, but
mm,
when I turned 16, I was sent to Japan as an exchange student and was required to study Japanese art after school.
mhm,
I chose judo, and that is what really launched me
mm,
in the
mm,
path of Budo. I wanted to learn how to fight. I wanted to learn how to be tough.
mm,
And judo was the answer
mm,
for those things. So I did it. I wasn't sure why I liked it. Maybe it gave me a sense of identity.
mm,
It definitely was, it was fascinating to see these people that could throw me
mm,
no matter what I tried to do.
mm,
And whatever that power was, I wanted it as well.
mhm,
And so the study of trying to obtain that power,
mm,
uh, that physical mastery, lasted a while. And I had some degree of it before I decided to be a professional budoka. I was
mm,
31 when I decided to quit my job and
mm,
teach jujitsu professionally.
mm. Wow, that's I mean, having spent some time together, I'd picked up a few pieces, but there's a lot I'd love to revisit, dig in, because I just, you know what, I love hearing about people's backstories, but especially about something that just kind of strikes a chord with them and then ends up leading them on a path, on a journey that kind of begins to be their life path in this case, and I've seen that in many other people's cases, and sounds like that. I guess it was maybe like a Hong Kong movie or something. The first movie you saw at your friends.
Oh, it was, yeah, it was definitely some kind of Hong Kong Chinese kung fu
Okay,
theater
right, right,
thing, exaggerated.
right.
But when you're a kid, you're not really sure what's exaggerated and what isn't.
Where they
You
snap
know.
snap like a wooden thing every time someone punches someone. They're snapping like a,
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about?
oh yeah,
There's
yeah. It
like a
was
sound over it.
cartoonish.
Yeah,
Like pa, and then like a zoom in.
right,
That kind of
right, right.
thing.
Zoom into the
So
eyes, right?
to the eyes and to the whatever the damage was.
Right.
And as I grew older, that kind of non-realistic fighting
Mm,
dropped
right.
in its appeal to me.
Of course.
And even today, but still the artistry, I can appreciate the artistry of excellent choreography,
Mm,
even if it's
mm,
removed from reality.
mm. Yeah.
Um, which is because as reality is a little boring and disappointing sometimes. So
It definitely can be, but it sounds like um, it was more than anything else. It was the fact that the people you were seeing in your everyday life, compared to these guys on the screen, they had a different level of mastery over their physicality and movement. That sounds like the kind of the thing that was like, wow.
that was really appealing. There's something about the back handspring and being able to like walk on your hands or do a back handspring. I didn't formally study gymnastics, just very briefly as a child, uh, and they actually discouraged me. They're like, "Oh, you're going to be too tall. You might as well like not even." And my parents weren't athletic minded, and they weren't pushing me to go in any particular direction. But that kind of mastery, I always admired it,
Mm,
and for some reason, I longed for
mm, mm,
that kind of control.
mm. I can totally understand that. We used to watch a show called Monkey Magic. Are you familiar with that show?
No.
It's actually a Japanese show that they had dubbed with English, and we used to watch it. And pretty much all the kids in my school used to watch that in what for us is primary school, elementary school, and it basically has exaggerated kung fu, backflips, somersaults, stuff like that. But it's also
Uh-huh.
based on a really cool story it's actually connected with a Buddhist story about going to India and reclaiming manuscripts. It's got like this cool backstory combined with like kung fu, and it was just super cool. But I used to remember like running home from school on a Friday because that show was on and I wanted to see that show. And all the other, everyone, like that was what everyone did because everyone wanted to watch that show because it was just a big, and I didn't actually find out till years later that it was originally a Japanese show and all the actors were Japanese.
Mm,
The whole thing was Japanese production.
mm,
Um, and it sounds
hmm.
like 16, you being called to Japan or sent to Japan, however you want to look at it. It sounds like that was another huge portal or doorway on your journey, right?
100%. I had no idea why because originally I wanted to go to Sweden as an exchange
Mm,
student,
mm,
but then they backstage they changed things up.
mm,
They're like, no, I think you'll be better suited for Japan. And so I went, and it taught me so many
mm,
things. But it was particularly useful in the martial arts
mm,
because, especially after I returned from Japan, America was in kind of an Aikido thrall
mm.
with Steven Seagal and his movies, which were good, and his Japanese is incredible, and his moves were his technique is good.
Mm.
uh, but but so kind of there's a mysticism that happens in some kind of Japanese martial arts
Mm,
circles that, from foreigners,
mm,
from Westerners that romanticize,
mm,
and the lessons in Japan as a teenager in judo were a lot of repetition,
mm,
a lot of repetition. Get lost in the repetition
mm,
and then make it live.
mm,
It really simplified it. It wasn't mystical. It wasn't otherworldly.
mm.
It was just neuromuscular memory
Right,
and hard work and some bruises and some chafed skin
right,
and tough.
right.
And that kind of sustained me, especially years later when I saw people in the Aikido world
Mm,
just kind of romanticizing Japan
mm,
or the sword or something else. It kept me grounded.
mm, mm. Well, I mean, at that time, it would be a few years after that that I first visited Japan, but at that time, you would have been, would have been much, much less westernized than it is now, with a lot less Westerners, a lot less Western influence, Japan that is. So you would have been really getting,
Mm,
a very kind of, if you like, a pristine experience of the culture and the way they operate and do things, and that's, I mean, it really is, I think, just simple repetition and focus and observing what other people are doing in the group. Doesn't matter what you're learning in Japan, they they put so much emphasis on those qualities that also for me, that is something that has taught me so much. And it sounds like that gave you maybe a different approach or a different way of approaching this whole topic than maybe most other people had in the West, which, as you say, kind of still maybe had a little more magic dust of people watching whoever
mhm.
the boom was at that time, Steven Seagal, that you had more like a grounded thing. And at that time, was there any? Were you kind of introduced a little bit to the, if you like, the philosophy of judo or the path, or was it more focused on movement and the physicality? Or
They would occasionally translate
okay,
things, but for me, just, you know, things to make sure that I understood the principles. I remember my host father talked about every step you take, you lose your balance slightly.
mm,
And judo takes advantage of that weight shift. And I was like, oh, he didn't do judo, but he was a smart guy. And then there were other there were other elements of that experience that still serve me.
wow,
Like most jujitsu instructors, professional jujitsu
mm,
instructors, or just any jujitsu instructor, they talk too much
mm,
when they are explaining.
mm,
A lot of it is earnest. They want to share this information, which is very hard
mm,
earned, and they want to be detailed and do a good
mm,
job. But I learned in Japan that you don't really need that many
mm,
words.
mm,
In fact, I learned with no
mm,
words, just following the shape and the form,
mm,
And I remember by the time they were surprised because when I started, I had no idea what I was
mm,
doing. I was just kind of just charging at them and like being thrown. But then by the end, one of my like the assistant coach, he pulled me aside and he was like, "Roy, you have a beautiful uchimata.
mm,
I can't believe you've come so
mm,
far, And that was just experimenting,
mm,
learning to do it, watching, observing. You see the timing, you see when they pull, you see what they do beforehand,
mm,
So that monkey see, monkey do is
mm.
undervalued in Western society where we're really into
Mm.
verbosity.
100% agree with that. 100% agree with that in most things. And I think that's sounds like that was one of the major lessons. I'm sure there were many others that you kind of received in Japan, as well as, of course, all the training and the ability to observe people. But that is definitely something that Japan has really taught me, is that the Japanese people in general put so much more emphasis on just doing and observing and doing over waffle, over explaining, right? Verbalizing. And I think, of course, there's a time, I get it. Like you go to a new place in Japan and literally sometimes no one will say anything. They just expect you to understand that what you do is you watch intently and then in small steps you replicate. But of course, for we don't learn that way so much. Certainly in the UK, I wasn't taught that, so I had to kind of slowly over time adjust my way of thinking about approaching a new topic, be it learning a language or anything. Just start by observation, start by by really by careful observation and then repetition, as opposed to, i.e., action, as opposed to getting a big lecture about something. And I think that's such a good way. I do see a middle way as well, which is kind of like, a little bit more of the Western, okay, here's what we're going to do, and this is why we're doing it, but let's dive in a bit quicker into I think there is a middle way there, but I really personally appreciated that side of Japan. It sounds like we got a lot of, although my path was not a Budo path, a lot of similar lessons, there. Yeah. And it sounds like your homestay father was like dropping truth bombs here. It's like, what did he say? Every step
No.
creates imbalance, and you can exploit that
Mhm.
imbalance. I mean, that's very, very powerful insight.
Yeah, he was a smart he was a smart man. My Rotary, I came through a Rotary
Mm,
exchange program. There were two main programs, Rotary or
mm,
JET, and of course we had our you know English teachers as well that were coming in from
mm,
all over. Um, one of the British teachers that was at our school was named Callum, and he was a really really smart
mm,
guy, great Japanese as well. Um, and yeah, they kind of circulated
mm,
me. They started me with a typical Japanese
mm,
family, moderate house, two daughters and a son. Um, Young boy was kind of annoyed me because I thought he was like spoiled, but they spoiled the young
mm,
boys in Japan until they hit junior
mm,
high, or and it was a typical family. And I went to the same high school that the
mm,
daughters did, and it was wonderful. Then they shifted me to a very wealthy
mm,
Japanese family, and his family made parts, and that was the father. They had excellent
mm,
English, all of them. The mother and the father had excellent English, and they manufactured parts for like Toyota and things like that, like
mm,
steel parts. Interesting, very very cool. They sent me to Nagano to go ski with their son, who was in college up
mm.
there. And then the third family was actually the president of the Rotary
Wow.
Club, and he was a Shinto priest.
Wow.
So I lived in a temple. I lived in
Mm,
the Toyokawa temple with an incredible
mm,
garden. They had the most beautiful garden there that, the community maintained. And, I would wake up on like on the weekend, and there would be like 50 people, like women doing stuff and all kinds of activity. They were hosting something. It was an amazing time. My host father, now I could barely understand him. He spoke no English, and was he could I mean, I could understand some things he said, but then if he drank,
mm.
they said his mouth got very small, and he was and it was like you
could not understand them at all. But it was a wonderful experience to have kind of like dip into each
Mm,
world.
mm,
They really did a
mm,
great job.
mm. I was on the other path, the jet path, when I came to Japan. So we kind of that was the time when it was kind of one or the other, I think, in terms of the doorway into Japan. So you took the rotary route, which sounds
Hmm.
like you had an amazing experience, and to be able to stay with three different people and three different families, a Shinto priest, I mean, that's really very, very, very wonderful, and it's clear to me that
I
molded
had
you.
no idea. I just complained. I had no idea how good I had it. I was just like, just a typical teenager. Like, why is it so hot over
Right.
here? Why do I have to wear this uniform? You know. But in retrospect, I'm so
Mm,
grateful for it.
mm, yeah. Well, I think as a teenager, hey, I think even being able, even though you had maybe not as deep an appreciation as you have now for those experiences, but you were, you were participating, you were involved, you were observing, and it obviously gave you a lot of, insight and clarity on how to proceed in this path, which eventually has evolved into being a professional budoka. But it seems to me like those were certainly, major seeds being planted at that time, right?
Oh, definitely. And I've rarely said this, but I was doing
Mm,
judo every day, and then doing the tournaments, and I hit kind of a rough patch where I lost, and I was just devastated. I lost a couple times in this tournament. I was devastated, and I had another man from the
mm,
Rotary Club who kind of took me under his wing. He was a good
mm,
judoka when he was in high school, and he started taking me for additional
mm,
classes. And some voice inside my head was like, "Give it your all,
mm,
Roy. You'll be glad one day that you did."
mm,
For no reason, like no one did judo
mm,
back at home. No one, it was, but that voice was
mm,
there
mm,
somehow, and I am glad that I
mm,
stuck with it. It was hard, but um, I never would have imagined that I would have been a professional
mm,
budoka
mm.
at that time.
Yeah, and I think it's for anybody listening to this who's maybe there's a new experience or a challenging experience included being put in their path. Like you just don't know how things are going to unfold. I always like to feel like if something is in front of me, then let me give it my best. I mean, let me just go into it fully and give it my best. And then whatever happens, that's going to benefit me more than if I dip my toe in and kind of sneer at it and don't give it my all, right? And a lot of times things
Hmm.
then turn out in a way that you don't expect. And for you, in that case, means obviously you're not teaching judo, but as we know and as we saw on this recent trip we did in Japan, the roots of jiu-jitsu and judo are one essentially, right? They're very much connected.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that judo, that having a background in judo
Mm,
assisted me in the early days of my jujitsu journey, um, and it really gave me a lot of. It was a great foundational
mm.
art to kind of start my deep path
Mm.
of Budo.
I think it's for me. I did a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of judo at high school, but I never got really into it. I was playing a lot more. You guys call soccer. I always have done. I like that a lot.
Mhm.
I like running around chasing a ball, but but
Hmm.
it was really interesting for me this time on the Musashi experience, which was in March there, going to the Kodokan and assisting with the translation and the setting up of this lesson that we took there, even though I wasn't actually taking part in the throwing and so on. I was able to be very, I feel very fortunate to be right there with Shimoyama Sensei translating and kind of learning and observing, basically
Yeah.
observing, and it really deeply affected me, actually much more than I thought that it would, because I was on a,
Hmm.
I was guiding the group through this 10-day experience of Japan, of really like diving deep into what I call the real Japan. And that was one of the experiences along that journey. And it took me by surprise, because the level of depth that Shimoyama Sensei went into in terms of explaining the path and explaining the essence of what this is all about in terms of judo and martial arts in general, that really resonated with me deeply. And I was really touched by the way that he approached this whole world of judo. I mean, he's obviously, this guy's a red belt. He's, fair to say, one of I think 15 in the whole world, of extremely high level judo instructors. But he was very grounded, very humble, very sweet, and it blew me away, that experience. I don't know if you want to share anything about that.
Well, I can definitely see how you would be affected by it because you were one, you were there, you were translating, but you were also observing the whole thing. You were watching the whole thing where, and that's actually an advantage for people that are injured and they train a martial art. Then they go and observe class. They're
Mm,
totally removed. There's no
mm,
bait
mm,
for their mind to, oh, I have to. They're not engaged in a struggle. They step out into that witness perspective, and they see so much more of what's happening. And they can observe all the
mm,
players, the patterns. What you don't really, you feel something in the struggle, but you don't get that
mm,
perspective. So plus that lesson was unlike any other private lesson I've ever received, in martial arts or otherwise. I mean, it was part guided museum tour because he went
mm,
into the history and explained like that does not, they might give like 30 seconds
mm,
of lip service to like
mm,
the people on the wall in a
mm,
typical martial arts lesson, but they will not go into um, the history, how he combined
mm,
these dying ryu and his process and the popularization and how he
mm,
spread it internationally and how judo has a uniquely Japanese, is a reflection of a uniquely
mm,
Japanese mind. And when he said that, I mean, I couldn't help but agree. Like it's so clever, the timing, the
mm,
off balance, the training method that allows instant application of skill when the moment of recognition arrives. All of that. When you look at, if you look at Japanese judo, it's
mm,
incredibly clean and close
mm,
to textbook. When you do, when you look at judo from other countries, Eastern European countries, I mean, globally, judo is very popular, but it's typically more
right.
muscular. It's more physical. And there are some techniques that you can get by on, but I rarely am impressed by uh, like
Mm,
American judoka as I am by maybe some other
mm,
international judoka. There's some amazing, like super
mm,
technical, super precise Korean players.
mm,
Obviously, the Japanese. There's a French master that I follow, Yarcel um,
mm,
Darcel Yancy, who I think he was like the French national coach, and he uses a
Mm,
lot of timing and misdirection and off balance, using body weight, rocking this way, heading the other way, boom, boom,
mm,
boom, mixing the guy up, making him stumble, breaking the rhythm,
mm,
timing over power, timing and commitment, and just to go down that road of perfecting the technique,
mm,
the kaizen, the continuous improvement. Yeah, that it's really been it's been on my mind
mm,
in the last couple of years. That principle, where you go, if you're doing manufacturing, it's like, okay, make our product as good as it can. Okay, let's go to the next step. Well, that's
mm,
what happens before that. The manufacturing process. Happens before that? How the
mm,
materials are sourced. Just everything. And they apply that same approach to
mm,
physical
mm,
techniques, waza, and it's a beautiful thing, and it is a
mm,
reflection of the Japanese
mm.
mind.
Yeah, it's very, very. It was very, very different to what I thought it was going to be. So, dealing with a red belt or whatever you call it, fifth dan, they call it red belt. Um, I
Hmm.
thought, um, you know, human beings are human beings. Okay, there's a certain amount of ego comes with being like one of 15 in the world, right? Or that you would expect that. I expected that, I'll be
Hmm.
honest. I expected a little bit of that. And not to say that our teacher didn't have any. I mean, human beings have egos. That's natural. But the way that he approached the lesson, I actually bumped into him on the stairs before the lesson started. We just literally bumped into each other because I was going down to get Hector, our cameraman. And he said to me, or is there anything you would like me to pick up in this lesson for the group? What would they like to, learn, kind of thing? And with that
Hmm.
question, I could immediately see the level of, you know, humility, adaptability, and like I'm, I'll teach what I want. Thank you very much. Like he could have, I kind of expected that basically, like at such a high level guy, but that wasn't his approach
Yeah,
at all.
yeah, yeah.
What would this group, where are they coming from? What would they like to know? Okay, oh, jujitsu, okay, so, and they'd like to do some ashiwaza. Okay, so let me adapt the plans that I've already created and just adjust that a little bit. So for this group, which he did, and he was a sweetheart, man. He was an absolute sweetheart, and I'd, I'd heard the words judo obviously many, many, many times. I've seen the kanji, I know the kanji, but it was the first time the way that he highlighted it, the whole explanation of the path. It's the first time that I really thought about what it means, and my translation
Mm,
would be the gentle path. That would be my translation of what judo, those
mm,
two characters, actually translate as to me. And of course, with translation, there's many different ways you could translate that, but I would translate it as the gentle path. And the mastery, what he was talking about is mastery in understanding balance, physicality, mutual respect, and bringing one another forward on the path or improving one another through the interaction, right? That was, and it wasn't just like, oh,
mm,
yeah, you could tell that like that was judo for him. That was totally what judo was all about for him. And yeah, it really blew me away. I mean, not to mention the fact that the way that he was moving, the timing, and the demonstrations he gave us with his black belt understudy were amazing. But yeah, it really, and it's a lot of things he said stayed with me after that. In the last few months, I've been thinking about
mm.
some of those principles and really trying to kind of bring in some of those principles, if you like, into my own teaching, which is in the breathwork arena.
Mm, mm, mm. Well, he's definitely, I mean, a master teacher can adapt on the
Mm,
fly and take joy in it, right? It's so many young teachers go in with a game plan, and then it's just like it's not hitting, and they're just like,
Right.
this is what I have in my notes, so they just keep plugging away. But like that adaptability, that's
Mm,
that's real mastery when you can do the appropriate technique or lesson
mm,
for the
mm.
crowd.
I agree.
It's yeah. He was wonderful, and a guy like that,
Mm,
super experienced. He's seen all kinds. He's like one of the main
mm,
teachers at the Kodokan, I believe. So he's seen all kinds of people, all kinds of international visitors. Get on the mat,
mhm.
try to be tough, try to show off, try to. When you're in one of those kinds of positions, you've seen it all. So when you actually come in contact with people with a good
Mm,
attitude, you can pick up
mm.
on it immediately. Which I think he saw how we were: attentive, eager,
Yeah.
studious.
I agree. I agree. I mean, also having lived in Japan for 22 years, I've seen a lot of times that, foreigner energy come in, puffed up chest. Here we are, and the group that we were with this time on the Musashi experience was just a lot of very, very sincere and lovely, sweet people. And that in Japan opens so many doors. People don't realize, as it did for you on your first trip here, people don't realize. And
Mm,
the number of times people have said to me, "Oh, I don't know why you live in Japan. It's like Japanese people are cold, they're not open, da 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 da." Well, here's the thing. If you come with a big, look at me, look at me, look at me, you're going to get a cold response, right? Because that's going to close the doors, even if they don't say something directly. But if you come with humility, with openness, with a demonstration that you're willing to learn and adapt, in my experience, the Japanese people are extremely warm-hearted. It can take a little bit of time to open those doors, right? But
mm,
that is the Japanese
mhm,
way. You don't put your cards down on the table immediately. You feel the situation out, right? You feel it out, and I
mhm,
I, I feel like the group that we were with and the experience that we had there was a very was very genuine and with the lesson in the Kodokan included, we had a lot of very sweet interactions with Japan and its people because they're always, in my experience, they're just looking for that little bit of sensitivity and adaptability. And once they see that, okay, here you go, here you go. And if they don't see that, all you see
mm,
is
mhm.
you only get to like level one, which is like the very surface level, right?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I agree. That like reading people, the Japanese people as cold is
Mm,
it's really surface level. It's like, oh, it's there might be barriers, but you're not gonna your
mm,
effusiveness and your is not going to change the Japanese
mm,
culture, and they shouldn't change. It's just because you're gregarious
mm,
doesn't mean they need to be, and
mm,
because they're not doesn't mean they're cold. It's a little bit more about like,
mm,
feel it
mm.
out. Don't
Exactly.
disturb the wa. Keep everything cool. You know.
Exactly. And that, don't disturb the wa. I think it's such a simple thing, but it's also something that I don't know about the States, but in the UK where I was back very recently, about 3 weeks ago, I was back in the UK visiting family, and I love the UK. It's got some amazing elements to it, but this idea, especially in public, like in a public space on a train or whatever, that you make a concerted effort in Japan to preserve the wa, which is the peace, the calm, energy, so that everybody can share that public space in a way that doesn't make anybody feel uncomfortable. That everyone can feel comfortable and relaxed in that public space. Therefore, you don't speak in a really loud voice. You just, it's not that you don't speak, but you adapt the tone and the volume of your voice a little bit to suit the train carriage or wherever you are, right? Whereas in the
Hmm.
UK, I don't know how it is in the States because I haven't been there for some time, but I guess I guess it's probably similar. In the UK, you could be in a crowded train or in a crowded area in public, and I wouldn't say this for everyone. There's certainly plenty of people who understand that, but there's equally a lot of people who feel totally comfortable imposing their, kind of private and seemingly totally unnecessary conversation on, on everybody in that space, right?
Absolutely.
Right,
Totally. Or blasting their music.
right,
Like, this is my
right,
music. This defines me. Love it. And it's like, dude,
right.
there's no need to make, that. But people are different. I wouldn't say that happens as much in the States only because we
Okay.
have a lack of public transportation. But only in like New York City. But even there, like it's a battle between the people that are like, "Hey, shut up," and the people that
Mm,
disrupting the law. They're like, "Oh, it's a free
mm,
country. I can do what I
mm,
want," you know. But it's definitely it's not as culturally encouraged to don't
mm,
disturb the calm waters of this train or carriage. I miss that. I miss so many things about Japan. I found myself like just
mm.
longing to go back to Japan, like get on a train that's running on time and
Mm,
go someplace, find a spot to eat.
mm,
It was really, I was
mm,
having withdrawals
mm.
when I returned.
Yeah. So was that the first time you'd returned since your homestay experience? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it had
Wow.
been 34 years
Mm,
since I had been back to Japan, and and I'm really so glad I went. I'm so glad I went. I just wanted to dip my toe in and see if it was, how it was. And so many people had been going, and
mm,
obviously with the dollar yen thing, I was like, okay, there's no better time. And I just, I was surprised at how much I missed
mm,
it and just the
mm.
calm and serenity. I mean, I immediately went back and started looking at
Mm,
homes
mm,
in Japan because I was like,
mm,
I got to do
mm,
3 months out here. I have to do 3 months. I need to
mm,
be able to get away for three
mm,
months, do some deep work,
mm,
some writing, some reflection. I've thought about all kinds of different
mm,
ways for me to spend more time in Japan. One of my affiliates might move out in the next couple of years. They're kind of
mm,
tidying things up here in the States, and I'm
mhm,
encouraging. I'm like, get over there. I will
mm.
teach. I will make special trips.
So
Um,
you'd had 34 years in between. That's amazing. And
mhm,
like,
mhm.
I mean, obviously Japan has changed somewhat since then, but you felt like I'm back. You felt like a consistency there.
I I did. It was a little disorienting when I got off, and I was like, okay. It was immediately into the train situation, having
Right.
to catch the right trains to get to the hotel. But I knew that I would, figure it out. And that was really that first train trip was the only time I
Mm,
felt a little bit uncertain. Um, and, I got off at the wrong stop, but then it was actually just the next stop. And it was not, and after that, I
mm,
kind of dropped back into, oh,
mm,
this feels good. It felt
mm,
familiar, but exotic
mm,
and safe and
mm,
visually stunning, and just coming up on that initial, the wrong stop, one stop too early, um, and just emerging and seeing like the signs and the crosswalks, and I was like,
Mm.
oh, I'm in Tokyo. Yes, it felt really cool, really really adventurous, and I also felt like this was a I don't know, it just felt like, no, this is where I need to be.
Well, I mean, I'm a huge proponent. So, and Japan, the great thing is if you're gonna do something like a 3 month or even a little bit longer than that, like a retreat type experience, you can totally just get a place here and do that without complications visa-wise and stuff. It's very simple. A lot of people do that. I know for a fact that a lot of artists, writers, creatives do spend time in Japan every year because it's so conducive to creativity. It's, as we say, there's this wa, which is peace, which is this calm sense. There's this almost complete safety. I mean, obviously you're very physically strong and capable person, but even for someone who's not, it's a very safe place. You just don't come across violence and aggression in the same way that you can in Western countries and in many other countries in the world. I've literally in 22 years, I've seen two what you might call like fights. One was on a football or a soccer pitch,
Mm,
and it was very short, but it was a fight. Someone was unhappy, and one was a traffic
yeah,
situation where there was a taxi and a bike, and they kind of one cut the other one up, and they got upset, and it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't like a hardcore. It was like there was a couple of little soft punches exchanged, and then everyone got back in their vehicles and went away. But literally two in 23 years, I would say is a very good ratio considering in my hometown of Leeds in the UK, which has got some beautiful elements to it. But yeah, if you hang out there on a Friday night, you're gonna go over two. You're gonna go over two in one night, right? It's just the way it is. So yeah.
it's a special place. I'm still working on finding my way back there. I even felt very, I used to write a lot of music, and I haven't really felt that. I've been
Mm,
kind of just into other things, other projects. But I actually felt like writing music for the first time when I was in Japan, for the first time in a while. Like, oh, maybe because the
mm,
background noise was just had died down so much. Um, but
mm,
I kind of noted that in myself. I'm like, that's strange. You actually want to. I thought of,
mm,
it would be so fun to just work on music
mm,
projects for a few months and just step
mm,
away from things. So
mm,
yeah, it definitely got its hooks in me in the best possible way.
mm.
And I'd be interested in hearing about which season you think would be ideal to do something like that. Um,
Oh,
m-
well, Japan is definitely a country of strong seasons, as you know, and right now it's what I call free sauna season. So wherever you go, wherever you go, you're in a free sauna. Like if you right now, I'm inside, all the windows are open, I have a little breeze coming through, but I'm literally sweating sitting here. I'm sweating pretty steadily, I would say, as you might be able to see, but it's a free sauna. And I personally would not recommend the free sauna time, although hey, it is actually a great detox. I mean, I believe this is actually one of the reasons why Japanese people live so long is because every year in the summer, for a couple of months, doesn't matter if you're doing exercise or not doing exercise, you sweat a lot, right?
yeah,
And it's the simple fact that unless you're doing, I do a lot of exercise also, but there's plenty of people who don't do exercise and therefore don't sweat, and you sweat whether you like it or not here. So I think it's a big clean out. But I personally, if you're going to spend only a few months in Japan, I would avoid the summer anytime from mid September onwards, all through the autumn is beautiful. Mid-September right through to like early December is a beautiful time of year. Obviously, it gets cooler as that time period goes on.
Hmm.
The winter I love because I love to snowboard. That's one of my you know areas that I just absolutely love to do, and I do that quite quite, I wouldn't say seriously, but I do it a lot.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not super serious, but it's just I'm really into it, right?
Yeah.
So that's late December through to March is a great season if you love snow and you love snow activities. But in terms of spending some time creatively here, I would go with the autumn season, as I've just said, or March, April, May. Perfect weather, perfect season. The
Mm.
only caveat for me is that unfortunately, because Japan has gotten so much more popular, which is, has good sides and bad sides,
Yeah.
I would gravitate as we did on our trip to kind of actively avoid the most popular spots, the most popular regions, and kind of seek out off the track, off the path, off the main tourist tracks areas to spend time into, to buy a place in. I mean, there's so many places available in Japan. It is a very very attractive situation right now because the population has dropped significantly already, and it's going to continue to do so. That just means there's more houses, especially in the countryside. There's more houses available than there are people wanting them. So that creates opportunities to get places in Japan. But I would always say, those are the best seasons: autumn and spring,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
the rest of the year is fine. But yeah, summer's my least favorite season here. That's just straight up how it is. I mean, it's
Understandable.
fine, but
Understandable. And
yeah,
I'll take that into consideration. Yeah, it seems like fall of next year might be a time when I'm out there, and maybe I can uh, explore some different areas. Like the idea of I got on all these like Akia spots where you
yeah,
can, and basically I'm like, I have no idea where I should buy a place. I have no
mm,
idea what's the best. You can concoct so many scenarios in your mind. Oh, I would want to
mm,
be on the outskirts of Tokyo so I can go in there. And
mm,
then it's like, would I really want to? And then you see these incredible Japanese style homes
mm,
in the countryside, and you're like, oh, this
right.
is unbelievable. But it's how far is it out there? Is it there's just so many things. I need to go explore, feel it out, and
I agree.
and get to yeah, good. Thank you. It's something that one should not rush into such a decision.
Yes. Take your time, and you're blessed you have the ability to do that, come and explore. I would definitely recommend that to anyone who's interested in coming and spending more time in Japan. And it's just it is such a wonderful place, but at the same time, you can already speak a fair bit of Japanese, and you understand the culture. You got to put the time in to do that. You got to
Yeah.
have some Japanese. You got to have a basic understanding of the culture so that you can connect with people and open the doors to
Mm,
a deeper communication with them, because as we talked about before, if you come with just expecting things to be the way you want them to be, or kind of impose yourself your way, you're not going to get a good response in Japan. So that's
hmm.
kind of that's important. But I do love being here. I've loved being here, and my journey to Japan actually started. The first thing I can remember is looking at a picture. It's actually a woodblock print. So you have the famous woodblock prints of Okushige and these guys, and we had one. It was not by a major artist in our house, a woodblock print. My mom had I don't know where she'd found it. I think she got it in London somewhere at a like a flea market, a secondhand market or something.
Mm.
And so we had this piece, a Japanese piece with two samurai um, in kimono and not fighting, just standing there. And ever since I can actually remember this piece just fascinated me. It just gripped
Mm.
me, and I was just like the hair, the kimonos, the everything about it, the color combinations, the whole atmosphere was completely different to all the other art. The house was full of art. My mom was an art teacher. We had all kinds of different art, beautiful art. But that piece was just, it was just felt completely different, like from a different world to all the other
Mm.
pieces. And I remember as a child just being completely fascinated by this piece. Like, how come I just like I want to be there? Where's the? I didn't even know
Mm.
it was Japan. I didn't even know it
Yeah.
was Japan yet. And I'd be like asking my mom, and oh, it's Japan, okay. So that piece really was the first thing that drew my attention to the Japanese culture and the Japanese kind of, if you like, energy. And then it wasn't till quite some time later that I had an opportunity through Jet to actually come to Japan. Actually, I came before Jet just to visit, and Japan blew me away. Japan completely blew me away, and
Mm.
I
What
fell in
year
love
was
with
that?
Japan. That was 1998, I believe,
Mm. Hmm.
the first year I came.
Hmm.
So maybe you'd already been here by then, I think, on your trip,
Mm.
or you were just
Yeah,
leaving, and
yeah. Let's see. It was like it was very close. It was, I don't know, 97, I think, 96, 97.
okay.
Something. It
So
was, what,
maybe
oh,
maybe
was that?
just
No,
over the.
no, no, no. I graduated in 93. Supposed to graduate in 93. So it was 92 that I was there.
Okay.
92.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's still, that was like an era of internationalism when still not a lot of people were heading to Japan.
No, no, no. Thankfully, it was very different to the way it is now, and it was still, it was still that kind of thing where it wasn't English written on the signs, so you had to ask and, kind of be humble. Like I don't know where I am. Somebody help me, and the Japanese were very very accommodating to that. But yeah, I immediately knew after one day of being in
Mm.
Japan. I immediately knew I'm living here. I'm coming back to live here. I just knew
Uh,
immediately. Like this is I felt like I was at home. I felt like I was
yeah.
at home. I felt like the way that things are being done here is just like this is just so me. This makes me feel so comfortable and I can let down my guard and just kind of relax and I don't feel like I have to kind of like keep an eye on who's who and where's
Mm.
potential threats and I just loved it. I fell in love, and I then came back a couple of years later on Jet. I'm still here, and still, honestly, as deeply in love with Japan. And Japan has its faults. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, under any illusions that Japan has some kind of perfect utopia. No, it doesn't. But all in all, I will take it, and I absolutely just, I just love being here. I love spending time here, and I loved guiding you guys through those 10 days into some of the, what I would consider some of the deeper areas of Japan where not a lot of foreigners tread. And I really enjoyed watching everybody's faces and watching their reactions as we kind of went into the deeper forests and had food in
Yeah.
little places that you wouldn't normally go to. It was just so much fun watching everybody experience that.
Well, I can only imagine. I mean, just going to the places and the fact that they were off the beaten path, off the normal tourist track, is the appeal.
Hmm.
And you're not like I go back to the temple that we had to hike up to. Like, no one's doing that.
Hmm.
No tourist is doing that. No one would, unless you knew what was up there.
Mm.
and you kind of knew the way. It's just it wouldn't happen. We didn't see anybody on that trip. We didn't see a
No.
single person on that trek.
Mm.
And that's one of the reasons why it was so special because we didn't see anybody else there.
Mm.
And then
Mm.
when we did like that second forest hike, which was amazing, and but it's more popular. One of my
Yes.
students who
Yes.
visits Japan regularly, he was like, "Oh, that's my favorite place in the whole world."
Mm.
That hike right there. He loves doing it, and it's good. It's that was good. And there's elements from that hike that I still carry with me, but still going to an area where there is no one, and
Mm.
it's not going to like Kinkakuji or some famous temple in
Right.
Kyoto where everyone's there, everyone's queued, everyone's got their camera, everyone's taking the shot. That's one way to do it. That's one way to do it. And I have some friends in Alaska who went there, and he was showing me. He had all the spots. He had awesome photography. I was like, oh man, you're getting me all juiced for my trip.
Mm.
But it was still where everyone goes, which is
Yes.
it. You need a little bit of that. You need a little bit of that.
Sure. Sure.
We're in the hum of it. I really enjoyed the time in Kyoto, like the location of the hotel. The hotel selection was fantastic. The location of it, we could go out and shop. There was like you're in the city,
Mm.
and we can walk down to dinner or whatever that is. But the fact that we were out in the Japanese countryside,
Mm.
absorbing that part of it as kind of the like like the main section of the trip. You
Mm.
know,
Mm.
the head is Tokyo, the tail is Kyoto, but the torso was in the heart of
Mm.
Japan,
Mm.
and that's where it's at. That's what makes the Musashi experience different
Mm.
than just going on your own.
Yes. Yeah.
Plus, there's a level of relief. Like, for example, my friend had an issue with her eye, and
Mm.
you took the time. I really appreciated that. You took the time to like address it and make sure, and you took the time with everyone. If someone was having a difficulty with something, like it could get resolved. Just knowing that something
Mm.
could get resolved because we had
Mm.
like a fluent Japanese speaker is a tremendous relief. Where Max can get as detailed as we need to. You know,
Mm. Mm.
that is part of what makes a vacation because
Mm.
you're being led.
Mm.
It's good to have autonomy as well, a certain degree of
Yeah.
autonomy,
Yeah.
but being led was I was on coming off of a long European trek, and you got to make a lot of decisions. But then once I
Yes.
hit Japan, then all the decisions are made. Where are we eating tonight? Oh, great. Um, everything was
Mm.
taken care of, which
Mm.
that's a rare experience, to be honest.
Mm.
It's like, I mean, you get it on a cruise ship, but I don't want to go on a cruise ship. That's not my, that's some kind of hell. That's some kind of hell for me. Um,
Yeah. No. Me
no
too. Me
offense
too.
to cruise lovers, but it's just like it's not my thing. But I understand the level. I mean, there it might be a little bit more decadence, but the fact that everything is available,
Mm. Mm.
yeah, I can understand why they find tremendous comfort.
Mm. Well, it was like I say, it was a pleasure. It really was a pleasure. And the eye thing was interesting because we had a little issue there. We had to go to the optometrist, and that was actually an interesting little experience. You remember sitting in that waiting room there, and then like we were in the depths of Japan at that point. We were deep in the countryside, so they were not used to seeing three foreigners walk into their little waiting room, and we had to put a little mask on. But the way that they looked after us was I thought was very sweet, and it was also very telling that to get seen, to get checked up, okay, you're all good. There's no problem with the contact. It's no longer in the eye. You just have a little bit. Everything's going to be fine. Just to have that confirmation, and for them to, you know, help out in that way. And okay, here's the fee. Okay, $20. You know, it's like it
Yeah.
was. I thought it was a really good demonstration of how health services should work, right? Like that's how they should work, right?
Amen. Amen. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's such a different thing here in the States. There's so many issues happening right now in the States, and just seeing how things can work. That's the major that's the major lesson that I pulled coming back from Japan. Everything works.
Yes.
Even if it's older, it still works.
Mm.
Even if it's a little, might look a little outdated, it still works.
Mm.
Everything works. And it's such a relief.
Mm.
It was nice.
Mm.
Um, so the Musashi experience, having that everything kind of organized and arranged, and being able to go to, you know, obviously that trip up the mountainside to the temple where we saw no one was incredible to me,
Mm.
to be up there in that hyper oxygenated air and this like really pristine environment.
That was the
Then
highlight for
also,
you, maybe?
um, that was the Kodokan lesson was the highlight.
Right,
That
right.
one resonated deepest. But then doing that hike also was, you know, that was also powerful. But then um, also in Kyoto, there was, sometimes have you ever heard of type one fun, type two fun?
No,
Like
tell me with that.
type one fun is like you're having fun, you're in the moment, you're having a good time. But sometimes type two fun is it's strenuous in the moment.
Okay.
But you look back and you're like, man, that was so good. It's like, a strenuous hike, or
Right, right.
there's other kinds of elements that require a little bit of strain. They push you a little bit, but
Mm.
that's kind of why you want to be there. Not everything
Mm.
should be birthday cake. And in Kyoto, going up the tram to the monasteries,
Mm.
that was mind blowing to me.
Mm.
The, I mean, those monasteries, they're beautiful.
Mm.
They're they were used for a long time, and they are way up there.
Mm.
Like they are removed. You're not just walking that.
Mm.
And just going to those places and seeing the beauty and the care and consideration and the upkeep
Mm.
of these temples was, that's another area that I would not have, what do we do? We ventured by car, then by bus, then by tram, then a walk.
Mm.
Too complicated for a
Mm.
tourist. No
Mm.
way.
Mm.
But with you arranging that and guiding us, it was really good,
Mm.
really good. That's an experience that not a lot of people would have access to.
Type 2 fun, right? We did walk. We
That
did
one
walk.
wasn't quite
We
as
did.
much type two.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
type 1.5.
Okay. Okay. Because we did, I mean, on overall, we did walk a lot. I mean, we're definitely going to be adjusting the tour. We did walk a lot, and we could tone it down a little bit. But I mean, I think one of the things, there's a bunch of things that I'm trying to achieve, and one of them is really okay, 10 days away, basically not completely cut off from, but really off screens, primarily
Yeah,
interacting with nature, interacting with the people around you, and getting to know people around you, many of whom, you don't have past experience with, but you share some common ground with, in this case, jujitsu, breath work, love of Japan, and interest in Japan. And just spending that time walking, being in nature. And I do find that walking, although, we'll probably dial it back a little bit, but just the walking and observing and sharing as a group in that time. It just kind of it really pulls everyone into the moment and away from the the mindset that I think myself and all modern people struggle with, which is just that technology's got too many hooks in our brains right now. And
Mm,
that's just, it's not criticism of anyone. It's just the way it is, right? But if you
yeah.
can actively
If you
step,
stop moving, you're gonna look at a screen. The minute you stop moving,
right,
you
right,
know, and the difference between you know riding in a car versus being on a motorcycle. The motorcycle is so much more interactive. Like you really
mm,
understand the environment, and then walking is the ultimate like
mm,
immersion.
mm,
So there are times where it's like, no, you want to be walking. I really like the walking in Tokyo on the first day.
mm, mm,
Going to that botanical garden
mm,
was cool. The breath
mm,
work there was cool.
mm.
The shrines. I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima again, and he honors the shrines, and it was in Plays with the Fox, and it's just
Mm,
so that was great too. Also very grounding, like
mm,
seeing real neighborhoods in Tokyo.
mm,
It's not just I don't think I mentioned this to you, but stayed a few extra days after the
mm,
tour, went back to Tokyo, um, and wanted to get some gifts for my son Apollo, so
mm.
went to a famous toy store there in the Ginza district.
Ginza, yeah, yeah.
Ginza,
Mm,
dude, it was. I mean, it was crazy. What made it to the toy store? Toy store hyperkinetic, just so loud, so every just oh my god, and it didn't stop. And then we're like going around
right,
the Ginza, and it was I have to say like it was soulless.
yeah.
It was so soulless.
Mm,
Going there and looking at the high end stuff and all the kind of wealthy people and people walking around the streets, kind of block it off to traffic, and people are walking around and everything is like super expensive um, in that area. And even it was just compared to I do this retreat in Costa Rica
mm,
um, most years. I do a jiu-jitsu retreat in Costa Rica in Tamarindo, and
mm,
then you get the hotel or and then have meals down in town. It's kind of touristy, but
mm,
there's a real beach and real surfers, and it's like thing. On one of the last days a few years ago, we staged in Liberia, not Africa, but in
mm,
Liberia, Costa Rica,
mm,
and was at some kind of like high end Marriott
mm,
where they built a beach,
mm,
and it was so tacky
mm,
and soulless and
mm,
hollow, and I was like, wow, people are coming to Costa Rica, get off the plane, coming here, and they think this is it.
right.
And I felt I had that same kind of feeling in Ginza,
Yeah.
where I was like, oh wow, this is just another soulless high end designer store, just
Mm.
like in Ibiza or
In
in
every other
yeah,
city.
just name any international city,
Mm.
and you got the same stuff, and it just was like, wow, I'm so glad it actually deepened my appreciation
Mm.
for what you chose not to do
Mm.
at the Musashi experience. Like
Mm.
that was not included.
Mm. No,
you know
no tacky tourist experiences. And actually, on the next year's experiences, we're gonna spend more time out of the cities into. We're gonna go to a couple of new locations, and we're gonna go actually further north. We're gonna go further south, and we're just going to be we're going to start in Tokyo, end in Kyoto, because those are kind of key areas you want to see, but we're going to spend a little bit less time there and just more time in that deep Japan zone where quite honestly very few foreigners tread. So there's a sushi place that we're going to go to in the countryside. I'm not going to say the name of the town because I don't want people flocking there, but
right?
there's a specific place And literally, I went there a couple of years ago with a friend who's a big sushi lover, and we went there, and it was just the most amazing sushi. You know, a couple run the restaurant, own the restaurant, run the restaurant, little place, and he literally said, "You guys are the first foreigners to ever walk through that door." You know, like, and that's like
That's amazing. That's so
it's
great.
I'm like that makes me very happy, right? And not just that, like that wouldn't be it was also incredible sushi, right? So the combination of those
Hmm.
things is that's where I want to guide people to, you know, and although, you know, some people say, well, that's not fair because there's you're taking foreigners away. We're taking a small group of foreigners who are very respectful and we're not broadcasting
Oh yeah.
these locations out on the internet. And so you know, it is we're looking after the places that we visit and really taking care of the wa, so to speak. And yeah, and the last thing I want to just touch on is the breath work. So obviously
Hmm.
that's what I do. I guide breath work. I love to do that, and just wanted to ask if there's any kind of were there any insights or any kind of things that really sparked something in you in terms of the breath work that we did during those 10 days?
Oh, tons, tons. Yeah, absolutely. One, um, for those that have never done breath work, there are many different styles
Mm,
of breath work that have evolved over the years, and sometimes people do them for different
mm,
effects. Um, and I really felt like the breath work that you led us on was probably the most uh, nuanced and uh, I would say kind of gentle but effective. It was
mm,
more like jujitsu, where
mm,
it's gentle and effective. It has the power to do. You don't have to like. You don't have to race to the end. It's
mm,
funny. I kind of had a. Um, I did Bikram yoga. This is a little side tangent, but
mm,
I promise it'll link up. I did Bikram yoga yesterday.
mm,
I haven't been doing my regular yoga practice, so I went, and I hadn't been in over 10 years to a Bikram
mm,
class. It's hot yoga. They sweat, but it that when I was young, it was the first yoga class I'd ever done, and I wanted to like feel it. I wanted to get the yoga experience.
mm.
So like every pose, I did as hard as I could. I was like, I'm suffering and I'm sweating and I'm like, oh. And when I went the other day, now that I have more experience in yoga and I kind of understand how their postures relate to other postures, I wasn't like chugging the beer,
Right, right.
racing for the effect. I was appreciating each sip.
Mm, mm,
And I feel like with many other breathwork styles, whether it's holotropic breathwork or Wim Hof, they're racing for the effect.
mm,
They're chugging the beer.
mm, mm,
And it's not about that with yours. You can go there,
mm,
but you don't have to go there.
mm,
It's graduated, it's nuanced.
mm,
The just opening with like and slightly longer inhalation, slightly longer exhalation, just to prime the body that it's safe.
right.
We're setting it's a neurological warm up.
Mm,
Like nobody talks about
mm,
this, and plus, I've read a variety of yoga things over the years, and I used to be more into meditation when I was like younger, and Kundalini awakening,
mm,
all these things. I was really really interested in it, but I didn't really have the patience
mm,
or the sensitivity, to be honest, to be able to kind of understand or feel some of those internal states. And when you would break down what we were doing and reference the physiological points, the anatomical points, it sewed everything together for me. Um, the stuff that you read about in the yogic texts, how the chakras, the cerebrospinal fluid, what we're doing, why are we pumping, why are we tightening, why are we doing these things, what
mm,
are the dangers,
mm,
the crystal
mm,
palace, third eye, all these things that are kind of hidden knowledge but you brought it together in such a rich way. And although I don't necessarily do like breathwork practice alone, if I do my home yoga practice, I
mm,
will end it with breathwork
mm,
now.
mm,
And I started in a similar way
mm,
where I'm just like a little earlier, a little later.
mm,
I'm holding the exhale. I'm fighting the breath, and I'm not that strong when the breath, you know, when that response comes for me to take a deep
mm,
breath. Like I can't resist it for too
mm,
long. It feels like, oh, I'm gonna die if I don't inhale. But but I try to push it, and I try to be okay in that liminal
mm,
space where I'm whether, and that can be an exhale where I've totally emptied my lungs and I've created a
mm,
vacuum, or I'm at full inhale and I take some extra inhalations to
mm,
stretch the
mm,
lungs and then exhale and hold in kind of a more neutral
mm,
state. I'm starting to feel my way around that,
mm,
and I think you opened up a lot of those doors to be sensitive and appreciate each step in the
mm,
process and feeling out. It's like you can kind of do the yoga posture, or the teacher can break down. Oh, you want to turn here to open your hip.
mm,
You're going to get a much better stretch if you're showing us how to turn the
mm,
hips, how to. It's not just approximating the shape.
mm,
It's like no, this is what the shape
mm.
represents, and I feel like you did that really effectively.
Thank you. And I think there's a lot of crossover, because I think from what I've understood listening to you and yeah, listening to Nick talk a lot about jujitsu on the trip, it seems like there's almost like a grappling, a kind of a reaching for another waza, like get another waza and like figure it out and almost have it like as a feather in the cap, right? And kind of chasing that
Mm,
next new whatever it is, a certain hold or a certain move or a certain
mm,
throw, and being very kind of fixated on nailing a certain waza. And I think there's something analogous happening in the breath work space and the meditation space, which is kind of okay, can I do a 3 minute breath hold, a 5 minute, whatever it is, a certain type of waza, a certain type of technique that is the new thing or is, supposed to create a certain special effect or something like that. And I think
mm,
stepping away from the chasing of a specific technique or a specific effect and stepping into a path of learning, growth, and exploration of each step along the way, that to me is the way to do breath work. So there's many different specific techniques and methods of working with the breath to achieve different effects physiologically and neurologically, but the whole thing comes together as a means of being very present and open and hopefully open hearted and joyful and present with your life. That's really like the overarching theme. And I think that gets lost, and a lot of people are chasing, you know, a certain technique or a certain achievement. And it seems like there's a lot of overlap in those two worlds in terms of, and maybe in many other systems too, in terms of people being attracted to a very specific achievement, or I can do that, or I've got that belt, or whatever it is, as opposed to the
mhm.
overarching path. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting that you observe that technical chase, which is a world and kind of a trap. Because, right, the, the goal of jujitsu is there are many side benefits, but the benefit of it is to do what you basically want to do in a situation. That could be restrain somebody, that could be protect yourself, protect someone else. That it, ultimately that's what you want to do. And along the way, in order to learn that, you have techniques, and then you master a certain number of techniques, but sometimes to counter a technique, you need another technique, and then to counter that technique, you need
Mm,
another technique. So it goes deep, and you go deeper and deeper. But there's something that happens where technological novelty can be a very big advantage. You get beaten by what you don't know in
mm,
in grappling and martial arts. You get beaten by what you don't know.
mm,
So to make sure that you're not missing anything, or to achieve an advantage over someone who's more skilled, larger, more experienced, you might have to search for the secret technique that no one is doing yet. And then when they
mm,
see someone having an effectiveness with that technique, then everybody leaps on that bandwagon, right?
mm,
But in a way, it's kind of useless because like you are an expert going against other highly skilled experts in order to, and so you're so deep, it's really removed from the true use of jujitsu, which is
mm,
just simple self-defense, protecting yourself and your loved ones. Usually those
mm,
require very simple answers, simple techniques
mm,
done well. Whereas you need very deep and sophisticated techniques to be able to
mm,
achieve a technological dominance over someone who's also really, really skilled and elite level.
mm,
It's like two different
mm.
worlds. And of course, yeah, the super duper elite
Right.
level guy could maybe beat the guy with more simple jujitsu. It's certainly
Mm,
possible, but is that really going to happen? Is that
mm,
really going to happen? No. And I feel like there's a lot of parallels, whether it's breath work
mm.
and searching for, like, oh, we have the secret ratio of breath to non-breathing, or
Right.
holding it in, or
Right.
whatever that is. There's also another area totally different, but also Japanese, that I found amazing parallels with jujitsu and the kind of search for that next technological edge. There's uh, a documentary called The Art of the Fold, and this is
Mm.
about origami. And they had a master in the 70s, and he would take paper and he would make origami shapes and animals, and he imbued like a certain life into these, you know
Mhm.
so he did it with a little bit of a flair, and he had a bunch of students, including some American
Mm.
students. And then that generation kind of expanded, and they started doing more complex shapes. And then those students had students. Then eventually you're using computer aided design to fold
Right.
into these elaborate, with thousands of folds, to create incredible structures. Yet, like, when are you ever going to have a computer to do that? I mean,
Right.
it's possible to do that. It's good it can be done. But if you're just sitting around the dinner table, it's better to just have a couple of basic techniques and make a crane, you know?
Right.
Like, I think humans are attracted to the new, no
Yes,
matter what.
definitely.
And so that's always a competitive marketplace advantage. If you can say you
Mm.
have something new, even if it's not new, it's just repackaged old.
Of course. Of course. Yeah, especially with breathwork and meditation. Like it's been done.
Right?
Um,
How
it's
long
been
people been
done
breathing? I
like
don't know.
nobody knows, right? But
Right.
it's a long time. And these guys did not have, smartphones and internet to take away their focus. They figured out a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
And I think I think, that was kind of one of the things that really touched me when we went to the Kodokan was that before we even began with any waza, Sensei made it very clear this is a way to yes, to learn skills to defend, absolutely, but also to work together with your partner in this space and improve one another to grow as a human being.
Mm.
That's like, don't forget that. And then we are going to go into Waza, and his Waza, his sweeps and stuff were just like entrancing. You know, they were so beautiful, the timing, like,
It's magical.
but I loved that he started with that platform of, you know, this is what we're, the overarching theme here is even deeper. It's just about learning and growing together, right? And I think the same applies to breath work. That's the overarching theme. Maybe it's not as you know, like flashy, you know, blah blah blah, the new special technique from the, you know, hidden in the Himalayan valley that's just
Yeah.
become available. Well, yeah, but no, you know, really, at the end of the day, can you become more present with yourself, more aware of your body, and more joyful and open-hearted in the moment? And all the different methods, in my opinion, are tools to get there.
Mm.
And you know, there's Mount Fuji, beautiful big mountain. You can start on the north side, you can start on the west side, you can start on the east side. It all ends up in the same spot, right?
Hmm. Hmm. It's. I'm so glad that you resonated with like that philosophy in judo. When I was younger, I just want to learn how to fight, right? But I'm reading. I got the book right here, Mind Over Muscle,
Mm,
the writings of Kano, and you know the
mm,
one of the basic tenets of judo, which I think is revolutionary. I'm sure it's been thought of before, but mutual welfare and benefit.
mm,
Like it, and that equates in business to like a win-win situation, you know, which is
mm,
basically modern capitalism. Like we
mm,
get, you know, we get phones, and it's like a global
mm,
supply chain, and the
mm,
most incredible minds to create that little microcomputer that we carry around
mm,
and tells us how to
mm.
get to the grocery store. I mean, it's 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 so amazing. Like it's a win-win. Where for so long, and some people still think this way. It's like I win, you lose. The only
Right,
way I can win is if you lose. So I want to make
right,
you lose, but you have to just zoom out beyond that, and mutual welfare and benefit. And
right.
Jita Kyoe, I believe, is the
Mm,
is,
mm.
and it's you know things like that, philosophies like that can affect the world. And it's, I mean, we need these philosophical underpinnings to keep us
Yes,
on
yes.
track so we don't get totally in that waza rabbit hole, you know,
Right, right,
whether breath work or jujitsu.
right. There's a story that Shimoyama Sensei told us in that lesson that I think really touches on that point. And he was talking about one of the first times that Kano Sensei was coming out of Japan and doing a demonstration, and someone from a different martial art wanted to challenge him. Big guy, big Western guy, and he resisted and didn't want to, you know, didn't want to destroy him, even though he could have destroyed him at any point. Wanted to, you know, he didn't want to fight. Okay, in the end, they ended up having, you know, the guy insisted they had a sparring session or whatever, and Kano Sensei threw the guy, but when he landed, he got under him to cushion his head so that he wouldn't get hurt, because he could have just, you know, dumped him on the ground and said, "How you like that? You know,
Hmm.
this is how I roll. I'm tougher than you, right?" But he he, along with the throw, created a cushion with his arm for the person so that he wouldn't have a hard landing, right? That was the basis of the story that I understood. I was translating at the time. And that then in the end, this gentleman who had been thrown was touched by this show of generosity and became a student. And I think, you know, that really sums up the true path, which is, of course, learning, of course, becoming more capable, of course, learning, in my case, different types of breathing that have different effects and different types of throws or different types of movements that give you the ability to use your body in certain ways and protect yourself. But even a deeper level than that, they these two, Kano Sensei and this gentleman who fought, were able to connect on a deeper level, and through that connection and through a moment of kindness and compassion, they were able to grow, to move forward together, and to create
Hmm.
a friendship and a bond, right? And I
Right.
think that's the essence of it. And like, oh, who, like, it's clear in the martial arts space, like, who's the alpha dog in the room, right? That can be, I could see how that could get, even in the breathwork space, it becomes very similar. Like, who's got the longest practice? Oh, I practice 3 hours a day. That's nothing. I do 5 hours a day. It's
Totally.
like,
Totally.
I,
Yeah, I mean that's so great. Like, no, I'm more austere than you. Oh yeah, it's like we're so competitive in these realms, and it's there's a there's a great book called Aikido and the Dynamic Sphere, and they talk about different levels. It's a beautiful book.
mm,
It has incredible illustrations in it. And it talks about Aikido and getting off the line of attack. It's got these great and it breaks down early like levels of skill and kind of like the most
mm,
moral approach to fighting. Like the least moral approach would be
mm,
maybe like killing somebody slowly, right, and
mm,
torturing them. And then above that, it's just killing them. And then above
mm,
that would be maiming them. And then above that is to defeat them and protect them
mm,
and allow for the opportunity for rehabilitation or to shift their mind. Because
mm,
there is something very powerful when somebody has the option, like you try to hurt them, they have the option of hurting you, and they choose not to do it. And not only they
mm,
choose not to do it, they're laughing. They're not even taking it that seriously. It's done
mm,
with a little bit of joy. Their skill level is so high
mm.
that they make you laugh. Like,
Right.
oh man, I just got swept off my feet here. I had no chance.
Mm,
And when they're not like lording over you and they're like, oh man, I can
mm,
I can try to do this too. It's amazing. It's inspiring. It can it can change a person's entire life. And
mm,
you don't know that that kind of level of skill exists. In just like business deals, like it can be
mm,
win-win, but it has to be executed skillfully. By
mm,
skillful means, we assist each other.
mm, mm. Amen. Amen, brother.
Amen.
And I think that is the way, and I think that is mastery, is that it is going beyond that need to show someone I can do this better than you, or I'm stronger than you, or whatever it is, and actually genuinely getting joy from the mutual experience of learning and growing, right? That's the joy when
Hmm.
you see someone get something, you know, when I'm sure when you have a student and you take them through that process and they receive their black belt, whatever it is, but you are partaking in their joy. You're
No.
partaking in their joy, right? Of the whatever it is that you've assisted them in some way, and they've taken that and they've grown and learned and become more than they were in some way, grown as a human being. And there's nothing, in my opinion, there's nothing more joyful than when we elevate one another and take genuine joy in elevating one another.
Mm. Mm. We're here to help each other. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I think that's a wonderful place to end this conversation. And it's been a pleasure reconnecting. Kind of like the trip ended very quickly, and boom, 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 we're all off in a different place. It's actually really nice just to spend a little time and connect. And likewise, if you find yourself in Japan, I'll be here and more than happy to go have some nice ramen, or if I can offer some
Yeah.
advice on the Japanese home front, I could certainly offer some, I'm sure.
That I appreciate it. It was really a memorable trip. I mean, like there were so many ways I connected with Japan and connected with you and Nick and all the other campers. And it was a once in a lifetime thing. And so I'm really appreciative, and I'm glad we got to connect. And of course we'll stay in touch and keep moving forward, sharing our respective arts.
And yes, I will link below this. Maybe we can mutually link. So if anyone who wants to connect with Roy and learn with Roy can do so, check the links below this. And thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Max.
Thank you.